There's everybody. Welcome, everybody. So welcome, everybody, to our first LinkedIn live stream on SaaS Mondays, live on Fridays. We apologize ahead of time for any technical glitches or difficulties, because this is the first time we are streaming into this community. But it's going to be a bi-weekly thing. We're going to do it on a pretty regular basis. And we're also going to be capturing what we're saying and transcribing that so that what we're saying here is you can read on Monday if you missed the Friday livecast. And so I do have some amazing minds in our call today. These are kind of the regulars on this particular stream. Will actually be expanding and adding a lot more guests, mostly SaaS founders and SaaS builders who are out there doing this, because the point of this is just a community of folks sharing learnings and lessons with each other. But with that said, let me kick it off and just have everyone kind of introduce themselves. So Bill, do you want to start with that?
Well, sure, why not? So hey everybody, welcome to SaaS Mondays on Friday. And my name is Bill Tarr. I'm with AWS. Some of you might recognize my face. We've done shows like Building SaaS on AWS before. The team I belong to is called the AWS SaaS Factory. So we spent a lot of time talking about SaaS, thinking about SaaS, and helping partners build SaaS on AWS. If you haven't met me before, it's good to meet you. Welcome to the show.
Kamal?
Hey guys, I'm also one of the AWS veterans. I spent 12 years at AWS. I think after that I moved to Confluent, and my biggest takeaway after moving to Confluent was like how much we took things for granted from the cloud knowledge perspective at AWS, and going outside AWS was a complete shocker for me. So, with that spirit, I ended up starting another company, Armistrate, where we help businesses build their control planes. So, and here I am, I'm one of the team members there.
And I guess I'll go then as the next one, right? So, hi everyone. So my name is Ermin. I work as a solutions architect at AWS, so senior solutions architect. So my focus is rather on the startup world. So I work with SaaS startups, B2B SaaS startups, helping them build products in the cloud. It has also historical background why I'm with the startup team. Before joining AWS, I used to be a startup CTO and founder. Again, with the SaaS portal and SaaS solution. And before that, I used to work as a manager and SaaS builder in various financial corporations. At the time where SaaS was not word, and it didn't even had word SaaS for our solutions. So it kind of a long time with the SaaS.
Love it. And I do think it's going to be a pretty common theme is, Bill also has some founder and startup or some startup roots in his background as well. And this is my fourth startup. And just to balance all the AWS veterans in the room, I spent a little more than a decade over at Microsoft. In fact, if you want on the call curious what Azure is, that's the color Azure. And so it's just the color blue from the Microsoft logo. We weren't overly creative when we picked that name. Originally, Azure was called Red Dog, and I always thought Red Dog was a much cooler name than Azure, but we lost that fight, and so it's Azure. So with that said, the topic today is AI and the impact of AI to SaaS builders and what's going on. And most of that's going to be a little bit more of a technical conversation around architectural changes that we're going to need to do to address AI and plan for adding AI to the SaaS applications that we're building. But before we get into that, I do think we need to address the elephant in the room. And so I'm going to turn to you, Ermin, to start that conversation. And that is, there's a lot of these threads out there that, SaaS is dead, long live, AI is here to replace it. None of us believe that's true, and most of us just think that's kind of people kind of misunderstanding the terms SaaS and AI agent and how an AI agent interacts with or is delivered, because most of the time the AI agent is going to be delivered as a SaaS application. But you've done a number of, if you've created a couple of blog posts on this topic, you are definitely well rehearsed or well researched on this in this particular area. Kind of what are your thoughts? And in the world of AI, do we need SaaS? What do people mean when those statements are made?
Look, honestly, I don't think that SaaS is going to go away. Why? Because SaaS is a business model, right? It's a delivery model of your solution, right? So when you say SaaS, or one step back, SaaS is actually business functionality that you require for your business that is hosted by your service provider or by your SaaS provider, and you pay for that service through some kind of subscription model, right? So this is actually kind of in a nutshell SaaS. So there are different definitions, but most of this is kind of my personal favorite because it's quite simple. Now, still, right? So what happened now when AI started coming in? We started actually hearing a lot of those, SaaS is dead and AI will actually destroy SaaS and things like that, right? And to be honest, there is something happening there, right? So I'm not saying that SaaS is a business model, AI is a technology, but this technology will dramatically change SaaS. So when I said, when working with customers and different startups, initial reaction of all startups was, okay, let's just build a chatbot in our SaaS application, and then we have Gen AI chatbot. You can actually talk to the chatbot, you can get help, and look, we have AI, right? It will, guess what, right? It will not stop there, right? So with AI agents, we are actually heading towards something which is actually called agentic SaaS, and I can talk about that little bit later. So that's the whole premise. The whole idea is actually that you don't want to communicate with your SaaS through a different front-end solutions, through different UX, where you need to log in and change, type in activities or submit or CRUD applications. You would like to, as a user, to chat with your agent and then let agent deliver the job for you. Maybe one, so that's on a technology, and we can go deeper into this one. So what I'm also noticing, and the numbers out there are actually kind of really showing that shift. In 2022, US VC money was going, 22% of US VC money was actually going into the direction of AI. 2023, it was already 36%. Last year, it was 42% of all US VC money that went actually to AI. So that there is that danger. It's not danger. So there is that shift, which is actually sucking out the air of, sucking out the investments out of B2B SaaS companies, or generally SaaS companies, and moving it towards all those companies that are doing AI. So I'll stop here now.
I think that's fair, but Kamal, you talk to a lot of investors and VCs. What are you seeing in that particular realm? So from as it relates to SaaS versus AI, there's definitely there was a push, especially the first of this year in Q4. Everyone was just changing the name of the company they were building to include the words AI because it was easier to get funding. What are you hearing from the VCs as it relates to SaaS versus AI investments?
Yeah, and that's exactly, like, I think you are right. I think what we basically, I think, just to cover what Armin also mentioned, a quick comment on that, right, is even though the money may be shared, I mean, it looks like, okay, large portfolio of the money is actually going in AI, and that there is a truth to that, right? But I think there is also truth to the fact that a lot of the existing businesses are reimagining themselves, reinventing themselves as AI. So it's not like they're every vertical that we look out there, the core, it's not that the problem statements have changed. It's just that they are reimagining themselves in this AI era. So it's not like, so it may look like, okay, all the investments are going into AI, but the reality is that all verticals and every industry is pretty much reinventing in the context of AI. So I will argue, even in the context of SaaS, uh, you know, uh, you know, it's not like AI versus SaaS. I mean, the way I see is all AI, all of these businesses still need SaaS. Like, even after adopting AI, they will have to distribute their software. They have to still optimize how they are running their software. They still have to integrate with each other. So none of those problems are going away. So I think it's comparing apples to oranges in my point of view. And so yeah, I'll leave it with that, essentially, that. Uh, that's the one point I was basically made, that all companies are reinventing themselves. And the second point, broadly, I will just make it is, every AI company we see in the market. In fact, Omnistrate, we are the control plane as a service platform, and majority or most of the customers are AI shops, in fact. And so AI shops, in fact, AI, I would say, is influencing the SaaS architecture and bringing new requirements to how the SaaS needs to be done. I'm happy to elaborate more on that. I'm pretty sure Bill has thoughts on that as well. But yeah, I mean, in in broad scheme of things, that it's I don't see AI and SaaS as one versus other. It's more complementary.
Well, I think Bill probably is one of the best people on earth to kind of talk about a lot of what when I talk about what is a control plane, what is an app plane, how to build SaaS, what's the proper architecture. A lot of the terms and phrases I use, I stole from Bill. And so, Bill, if you wouldn't mind, walk us through when people say SaaS, when people say AI. I don't see them as different. I see SaaS as a way of delivering AI. But can you walk us through what people are getting wrong on some of those terms and what those terms mean?
Yeah, and I liked several of the things I heard already. So I'm going to call back to one of the things Ermin said. SaaS is a business model. So before you think about anything else in terms of how you're trying to contextualize SaaS, remember this is about the business model for how you deliver software to your customers. Simple as that. All of the other value propositions, operational efficiency, cost efficiency, growth, all of those things are in different aspects of SaaS, and different SaaS applications have always had different variations of those. For example, in SaaS, we have customers who are building completely silo SaaS. Every single one of their customers is getting their own stack, not really focused on cost optimization, not really focused on operational efficiency, still SaaS. We're not disqualifying those as SaaS. We have people who are deploying most of their workloads, like Databricks, for example. Databricks deploys most of their workloads into customer-owned accounts. From an operational efficiency perspective, that isn't really trying to drive operational efficiency. It's trying to drive efficiency for the data and the process and their customers are trying to do. So they're still getting to growth. They're still managing to manage the software on the customer's behalf. And it's still a business model. So there's always been a wide variety of these things. And as we think about where AI slots into these, in some ways, yeah, it's going to challenge us, just like Databricks model challenged us. More things might get pushed closer to the data. Where does that data live? It might force us to think about how we manage that software. Some of that burden shifts back onto customers, or if it has to be deployed into existing implementations, perhaps, maybe AI is going to drive us to sort of a platform play where you're deploying your SaaS applications into some UI and data context that already exists, like Salesforce, for example. All of these questions, though, don't change the primary understanding that this is a business model of how we're delivering the software. You still need to have visibility into where all your software lives. It's still your responsibility as a software provider to try to deliver features to your customer as quickly as possible. If you just give them software and you throw it over the wall, then we're going back to 2005. I don't want to go back to that world again where it's hey, what version of software are my customers using? Oh, the one from 3 releases ago. I don't want to go backwards to that. And as a software provider, I want to keep releasing new versions. I want to keep those versions intact. And I want to understand what those are. And you mentioned control plane, Michael. A lot of those things in terms of being SaaS, one of the things I like to say, I don't know if it's true, but I like to say it anyway, is if I'm trying to understand if a company is actually doing SaaS or not, I ask if they have a control plane. If they have a control plane, they're probably doing something that I would consider SaaS. If they don't, they might call themselves SaaS, but how are they actually doing any of those things I just talked about? How are they understanding the versions their customers are operating? How are they releasing features as quickly as they can? How are they maintaining that operational burden and shifting that off of their customers? The answer is they're probably not, but they're probably still calling it SaaS. So in this AI world, this is just a new version of that, is how do you manage these things on your customer's behalf? Do as many of those things, get as much business value for those customers as you possibly can, even as the paradigm for how we deploy the software starts to shift in some way. So that's my viewpoint on it, Michael. And I know we're going to get into a lot more depth on some of these pieces as we go, but it's for anyone who's listening, SaaS is not dead. SaaS is evolving. And I actually think Satya was from Microsoft. It was one of the guys who really kicked off this conversation. I think that's actually what he said. I don't think he said SaaS is dead. I think what he said is the model is going to evolve and it's going to shift. And it's the person who's the CEO of Microsoft, and that's one of the largest SaaS implementations of the world with Office 365, is that's a very clear statement of how they see their own SaaS product evolving and how they think it's gonna change for them as a SaaS operator as well. So there you go. Long story long.
I love it, and I appreciate your thoughts as always on these topics. So I think we've talked two kind of things. And so we have one core theme, which is AI is going to force the evolution of SaaS. And as it relates to the evolution of SaaS and what we're going to see as SaaS builders, we're going to see changing customer expectations in terms of they're just kind of expecting some, LLMs type functionality built into everything. And let's talk about that here in a second. But there's also kind of that, there's also kind of the conversation, and Bill, you just kind of touched stuff. So I would like to stay there as we're on the business model now, and let's get into the technical conversation in a second. Will AI change the billing models and customer expectations of billing models as it relates to go-to-market? And let me go back to Bill on that one, because you probably talk to more companies that are just about to launch their business as anyone on earth. And so what are the implications so there's an expectation that an AI agent is kind of billed or priced in a different way. What do we need to be thinking about there in terms of launching and going to market, or is that overblown or overhyped as well?
I think this is actually one of the areas, and when I've read a lot of these SaaS is dead posts, one of the things that jumps out at me is they say something like SaaS is dead and then immediately pivot to consumption-based pricing. It's like, wait, hold on. You could do consumption-based pricing in SaaS. Who said that that wasn't an option? Like when was that not an option for SaaS? Now, this is where it gets really interesting for me. And when I start to read about what's going on with AI companies and why people are saying, oh, subscription-based pricing is dead, a little bit of a lack of understanding of the ecosystem of SaaS that already exists out there. Because everything that you would call infrastructure SaaS already was doing some form of consumption-based billing. Nobody's buying DB as a service and not paying in some incremental way. I'm not buying DB as a service for $1,000. No, I'm paying per CPU cycle, per gigabyte of data stored, any number of very specific subscription-based, consumption-based pricing in the subscription, right? And I think going back, OpenView actually had some really interesting data that I saw not that long ago, that 61% of companies, SaaS companies, actually already have deployed usage-based pricing. And that's rapidly increasing. And I think part of that is that AI is, or most closely resembles, infrastructure SaaS, right? This is us consuming getting usage of a specific product. Now, I think there's some really interesting aspects of this you could dive into, right? Like, what does that billing look like? How do we think of the billing? And I think probably in terms of what our team is talking about, outcome-based billing is probably the most interesting aspect of that. I mean, I don't know why we weren't doing this all along. I don't know why it wasn't like a good thing. Like, hey, if my operation didn't succeed, I'm not paying for it. Like, that sounds pretty good to me. Like, as a consumer, I want all my products to do that, right? If my car doesn't drive, I don't want to pay for it. That sounds great. Now, it fits in really well with AI because AI can be non-deterministic. At least Gen AI could be non-deterministic. You might not get to the results you want. I think building into pricing for AI, this concept that we're actually continuing to evaluate the outcomes that we're producing and then charging customers on that basis, that is evolutionary, maybe even revolutionary in terms of pricing. I think that's really going to perhaps break everybody's brains and make us start to rethink about what's going on with SaaS. But I will give you a caveat when we're thinking about pricing, which is, as long as I've been talking about SaaS, we've had consumption-based pricing. And as long as I've been going to customers and talking about consumption-based pricing, there have been a huge subset of customers that raise their hand and say, wait, my customers don't want that.
Yep.
I'm in healthcare. I'm in fintech. I'm in GovTech. My customers don't have variable budgets. They have a fixed budget. And if they're going to consume my product, they have to have a predictable window. So how you do how you kind of create this balance between these two things of, I want consumption-based pricing and I want to give my customers the best possible value based on outcome-based pricing, versus very conservative customers who still exist and aren't going away anytime soon, who are highly regulated, have very strict budgets, and need to understand exactly what they're paying for quarters or even a year in advance. Like, thinking about this balance, I don't think you can simply throw away all of your subscription-based and other pricing models and just be like, everything's consumption-based now. Great, let's have more consumption-based based pricing. let's also keep working with our metrics and analytics and billing to understand what we're charging our customers, what it costs us to manage those, and try to get to a model where perhaps we could even create other pricing models other than just consumption-based pricing, even if that's one of the tiers of offerings we're putting out there. Hey, we've got consumption-based pricing, but if you're an enterprise, call us because we can estimate your usage and figure out what your bill is going to be for the year and make that predictable. So just saying consumption-based pricing doesn't absolve us of the responsibilities of diving deep into cost and pricing and understanding how our models affect our
I love that.
Just-
And it does tie into the next conversation I want to get into in a second, but I do want to start with, I do want to go to Ermin. So I do want you to follow up on that, Ermin, but I also want you to give me, because Bill, Kamal, and I are a little tied to Silicon Valley and a little tied to the US angle on this. And so I would love, Ermin, to you to do two things. One, respond to what Bill is saying, and also, is there a European angle here that's slightly different than our overly American view?
So what I see actually, and this was also my remark. So what you said, Bill, right? So we used to have subscription-based model or seat-based model. Now we're actually going to a consumption-based pricing, and then there is that third version, which is actually outcome-based value, right? So outcome-based pricing. Recently, when talking to customers, I have an impression that both SaaS providers and their customers, they're kind of afraid of this tokenized consumption, so that they're afraid of pay-per-use pricing. So because that they are actually not sure themselves how much they will actually spend, right? So there is a kind of technically, what I see that startups are doing recently is something like bring your own Gen AI model, right? Bring your own key to OpenAI, bring your own key to Bedrock, or use Bedrock in your own account or things like that, right? So because both sides are afraid, what if my customer goes crazy and start actually spending a lot? So that's a subscription-based model, the old one, or pay-per-use. The customer is actually afraid that their people will actually spend way too much, and how do you control it? How do you make sure that you're not spending a lot? So this is something that there will be probably solutions for that. One of them is actually bring your own LLM and then use it, right, as part of the SaaS. Regarding the outcome-based model, I really love that, right? Because it's a kind of radically new, right? So we used to have pay-per-use. I don't know, when you use cloud services, Lambdas on AWS, for example, it's actually pay-per-use, right? So you pay, for each invocation of the service. Here, so it's something that existed even before. With outcome-based pricing, this is something that we didn't have before, right? And I'm not really, to be honest, I'm not sure how does that will work outside of marketing agencies or things like that. Maybe there is a way to quantify that outcome for everyone, but that quantifying will probably then produce completely new area of expertise in SaaS, which is actually pricing specialist to determine how to price the particular SaaS, which is actually AI driven.
Love it. I agree. So Kamal, I'm going to turn to you to kind of start moving us more towards off the business angle and a little bit more towards the technical. And I think one of the places we can start in moving from a technical perspective change is talking about, architecturally speaking, when building out or designing a SaaS solution, adding an LLM is not nearly as hard as training an LLM. And so a lot of people are a lot of people are saying, hey, if I'm adding an AI, I also then need to have a bunch of really big GPUs assigned here. And so I can't add an LLM to an existing SaaS to answer a customer question without these big GPUs. Can you explain walk through the difference of, when making a design decision or bringing a new AI app to bringing something, a pre-trained LLM versus having to train something new and planning that architectural, what considerations from the SaaS do you need to start thinking through?
Yeah, 100%. I think, and that goes back to broadly the question of how AI is changing the SaaS architectures in general. I think one of the things that when we look at any all of these, what has essentially AI added, right? AI fundamentally had added the concept of model. I like to call it like a, there used to be one Google giant, one Google model, and now there are private models of, or you can imagine like a private Googles for on a specific set of data, or broader set of data through to which you can question something and answer something. And it was not possible to have the private Googles before, and now it's possible. That's how I like to think, at least. So what the layer fundamentally that AI has added is that question of thinking and reasoning, and being able to do a question and answer, and that is essentially done at the heart of it is through the models. Now, that when we talk about models, so and you look at what challenges it bring it from the SaaS perspective. One aspect is how do you build a model, and then how do you leverage the model. And so when you think about now, how do you build a model? You start thinking about, okay, the entire work. Am I still here?
We are here. I can see.
Okay,
I'm so yeah.
I'm just making.
Does the cameras?
Okay, you're muted, I think.
I did. Sorry, I pressed the zoom in button and threw everyone off. My bad. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All good. So when we talk about building the model, it involves different stages of it, from the cleansing to data gathering and building the model to fine tuning and blah blah blah. The fundamental framework though that we need over there from SaaS perspective is how do you now allow a job based or a long running task essentially on a per tenant basis. Because if you're really allowing customers to build their own models or have their own, or at least either have their own models or fine tuned with respect to their tenant information, then you need you need the capability of running a long running tasks, and be able to do that at the per tenant level. So that is, typically, if you just look at the traditional DBaaS, or you look at other B2C SaaS companies, traditionally long running jobs was not that common, but now AI has fundamentally introduced that concept of having a batch jobs that needs to be done, and not only just needs to be done one time, but needs to be done on a per tenant basis. The other thing that to note here is that from the architecture perspective is that these jobs, AI usually the technology is still maturing, and a lot of the jobs are not run to be crash resistant, and they're not doing the checkpointing, and so there is fundamental support that is needed. And remember, the GPUs are way expensive than CPUs, and so the cost of, if you run something for 5 days and you say, okay, you know what, it crashed and I have to redo it, my goodness, I mean, that's a lot of money lost, right? And so now, so that's why software has to keep up, and in terms of the platform that is supporting it has to keep up with the requirements out there. And the requirements out there is GPUs are expensive, the applications are not written well, and so the platform, or the SaaS platform itself, has to support ability to be able to do checkpointing and resume from where the things are being left, right? And so that the environment is bringing in many ways the new requirements of what the SaaS platform, or how the SaaS is evolving. So that's on the, for example, on the training and building side. Now, if you take a look on the inferencing side, or how when you're getting the value out of the model, the same challenges. The model as a concept never existed when you're doing the deployments and things like that. First of all, as Arvind pointed out earlier, nobody is opening their data and saying, hey, for these thousands of agents, go ahead, and I'm just sending it to you. Please run the processing and give me the information out of it. And so people have asked to now, in a secure way, how do you get agents or applications deployed in customers' account, and doing that securely and meeting all the compliance standards, and providing the user experience in itself is a challenge, right? The second challenge is, okay, now if you want to take advantage of the model, the SaaS has to bring support a first class model as a first class citizen, and it has to support during the onboarding process itself. Hey, okay, this model is for this tenant, and so that model needs to be secure. It needs to be securely stored somewhere. It has to be fine tuned with respect to that customer and the context that is usually needed. I mean, we all are familiar with RAGs or that is often needed on top of the models to get the better results and better accurate answers. And so those also needs to be fine-tuned now per tenant. And so that the entire onboarding and the provisioning process is redefined essentially, because those steps didn't used to exist in a non-AI era. And the AI is basically has putting additional requirements on the SaaS architecture to support those things at the per tenant level. I'd love to hear from the other folks, but those are some of the thoughts. Obviously, this is a long topic. We can continue, but I just want to give a chance to Bill and Armin to weigh in their thoughts.
Maybe if I can jump in just on that architectural model. So the way as a SaaS user, how I envision using my SaaS in the future. So currently when I need to do, some kind of activity, I need to log in into 3 to 5 different SaaS applications, right? To book my travel, to do my expenses, to protocol my customer meetings, to get the customer data from the CRM system. So I'm not talking only about getting data out of the system, like nice reports or output from the LLMs, but also generating those CRUD operations, calling APIs to protocol. What I did with the customer. So we will still need that, right? And SaaS will still stay there. So in my brave new future, so the agentic age, how I like to call it. So in the agentic SaaS, you would actually call your local agent, open a chatbot basically, and simply say, okay, protocol this customer meeting, send an email to customer as a follow-up, and then book a trip with a customer on 5th of December or whatever, 5th of April for me, and also do the expenses for that trip automatically. So that means that what we will see is actually in SaaS we will see a collapse of that application layer, so that business logic will actually go rather to the agent or orchestration level, right? So we will have a set of agents that will be either deployed at the customer, or they will be still deployed with me as a SaaS provider. But those agents will then operate all those CRUD operations that we have. So all things that Kamal said stay, right? We still don't know how to solve tenant isolation. We still don't know how to make sure that agent doesn't actually spit out the data of a different customer or things like that. So all those dangerous things, right, that we need to control that. But I see that also with startups. A lot of those startups are now moving into a direction, or some of those startups, not a lot. Some of those startups are actually moving in the direction of a headless SaaS. So where they are actually collapsing their application layer and moving it rather to the agent layer, right? So APIs will still stay, but on top of that, they have those agents, and those agents will then orchestrate the API calls for their customers.
And designing for data, I think, is kind of the next question, and designing for data access to both ensure that the application has the most up-to-date data and why that matters, as well as also ensuring that the AI agent doesn't get access to data that it doesn't need. And so, Bill, I'll send this one to you next, which is kind of that data conversation. And I'll start with kind of the pretense of, my daughter went to school at University of Idaho, which is in Moscow, Idaho. And I'm an international business guy. I have customers who are in Moscow, Russia. So if I ask my AI agent, hey, book me a flight to Moscow, both answers are going to be perfectly valid, but they're going to be, it's going to be cold there either way, but I might be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so how do you start designing, when you're using SaaS to deliver AI, and AI is dependent on data, how do we need to start planning for data access and as it relates to AI, Bill, and what are the changes that's going to force us?
Yeah, and there's an evolution to this, of course. So every answer we give here is probably going to be different next week anyway. But I think as an approach and thinking about where we're going with AI in general, one of the things I really like about the concept of agentic AI, and to sort of, I mean, we didn't really define it for people. I think we can assume now most people are arriving at these conversations with some level of understanding. When I think of agentic AI, I just really think of a workflow. Really, I mean, all we're talking about in terms of these agents is something that says, do this, then do this, get the answer, then figure out which of these three things you're going to do. It looks a lot like a workflow. You could actually draw this like an old workflow chart in Visio or whatever, right? Where you actually got steps and you start here and you go here. And then if this happens, you go over here. If that happens, you go over there. Agentic AI isn't really that different than that. Now, where it's interesting, and where I think in a SaaS application, there's a number of different implications, is some of those steps really have the ability to get context to what's actually happening and what should happen. And I think that kind of heads in the direction of RAG a little bit, retrieval augmented, right? And that means that we're able to say, hey, for this specific use case, you want to go get this data. So Michael, going back to your point here, we have lots of ability in workflows to make specific decision points, to gather more information so that we understand the context of the decision we're making. So I mean, I'll go back again, like I know Satya kind of laid down an interesting definition for us. And part of what he said was he sort of imagines these agents moving with you. Like, so in some ways, as you're building a SaaS application, you almost want to think about these agents as kind of moving around, and perhaps them even move across companies someday, but they're moving with a specific amount of context already, where it's like, hey, this is Michael. Michael tends to travel to Moscow a lot. Now, I mean, it's broader because we're thinking multi-tenant. So really, let's start at the tenant level and think, hey, Omnistrate is a startup. They will tend to maybe talk to these type of companies because they're building a control plane, and these type of companies need a control plane. Now, as an individual of that company, it might even need more context to reach out. It's like, oh, this person's in sales in Omnistrate. So therefore, like, they're taking this action. I can guess that they're not going to go and want to look up the architecture diagrams of our customers. They're going to want to hear about the profiles of these customers. They're going to want to go out to their different run books and see what those companies are building and like what their market cap is. Like, these specific points of a conversation are really the power of agentic AI for a SaaS application. Now, again, it gets a little bit too broad in some ways to think about it this way, because it's not going to be easy to say, hey, I wrote this agentic AI and I'm going to deliver that through Omnistrate, but I'm also going to deliver that to these other companies. I think that mechanism is going to evolve at some point. Like, you might actually be able to pick some sort of pre-baked agentic AIs that have access to certain types of data and carry those with you. And that, again, like in the beginning, I said, like another part of like the kind of final part of that was eventually this might sort of evolve platforms. Like, you might end out with platforms of services. Michael, you mentioned like the use case of like, hey, I'm traveling. You know, I want, or sorry, I think that was you. Like, I have to go and like look up my tickets here. I have to go do, you know, check the weather here. I have to do these things. This concept that there's balls of data out there that kind of travel together. And these agentic AIs might actually be able to apply themselves to other solutions in a platform like Play, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm using Salesforce right now, but you know, this agentic AI that I'm using, this agent that's following me around, actually has all this context about me, knows the specific type of stuff I'm doing, you know, has the ability to sort of make these same decision points. And those decision points might be true for both Salesforce and my travel app, right? Like, it knows these specific points, and maybe the decision points start to evolve. Whereas a SaaS provider, what I'm really doing is building this agent that can be used to create context for different applications. And that becomes, I mean, I think I heard you say headless AI, headless SaaS. I think that is kind of this feeling that I have is like, hey, it's got to follow the data. So it's going to go where the data is in some ways. It's going to land somewhere closer to, you know, these platforms or the customer accounts that already have data. They're going to be able to solve specific problem sets because it's not data itself. An agent is, you know, is both headless and bottomless. It's just a ball of logic that follows things around. It will go toward where the data is and then try to surface itself out through some existing UI that people are already using. And as a SaaS provider, or even just not to use that term, as a software provider now who's building agents, like, that might be the lens I'm looking through, is not like, who are my tenants? Who are the platforms who are going to consume this agent for on behalf of their tenants? And that kind of breaks your brain a little bit. But I think it's interesting, again, to go and think about Microsoft as their use case here. Microsoft has Office 365. There's tons of data passing through it. Might there be agents that someone could write and deploy onto there, and then also deploy onto Salesforce or onto Stripe or onto these other large platforms that have large amounts of data flowing through that achieve specific objectives, and provide the right context for how to work with a specific customer in a specific use case. And then, like, kind of going back, like what he was saying, now this concept is kind of following you around. And as you go to different applications, maybe it trains itself and gets better at working with those applications. It focuses on that real core piece of business logic, regardless of how that's being surfaced to you as an end user. And that is what evolves. And that's what makes the power of AI really start to evolve and get better at doing some of these cases. So I think it gets a little bit philosophical and theoretical as you get in there. It's like, oh, eventually the world is all going to change. But hey, the world is all going to change. I'm jumping to the end of this story. I think if we look back on this 5 years from now, we're probably going to laugh at ourselves. It's like, oh, we were so naive that we didn't see, Google coming, or like, what are the next big thing that blew all of our minds? Like, that's probably really obvious in hindsight, looking back at right now. But right now, it's kind of guesswork. And I think just guessing about these things, the technology that we're driving in these agents, in the context of SaaS, is really going to change for a software provider. It's really going to change for those data-based SaaS providers who already have a lot of data and now might actually be introducing agents to them. And of course, as a customer, like, it's kind of funny because it might be like the duck in the pond. All of these things are changing, like SaaS providers and how they sell is changing. These large SaaS providers with data is changing. To me as an end customer, my experience in Salesforce might suddenly get better, and I won't know why, but it's because all of these moving parts behind the scenes have gotten better at doing their jobs. And even maybe doing my job eventually, but that's a whole nother segment for us to worry about. So yeah, that's I think from a technology perspective, all of those things are going to be relevant. And then finally, like, how we deploy these things, like, that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time thinking about.
Yeah, and so if we get to deployment, I think that's a great way to wrap it back in. And Kamal, this one's kind of coming to you because in your career, you've built more than a dozen cloud services. You've done it in a lot of different ways. You understand multi-tenancy and what it takes to build multi-tenancy, and what Bill's talking about is, in terms of, an AI agent is aware of who you are, but on the same token, as a SaaS provider, as the builder, we need to make sure that all these agents are separated from each other, and that a customer doing one thing is not able to access other people's stuff. We're able to track their usage and the rest. And so for SaaS companies out there now who are building out their solution, can we talk about why multi-tenancy and doing multi-tenancy well from the start of your building out SaaS is going to be more important tomorrow than it is today? And I think it's pretty important today. And why using things like Terraform are great, but as more and more dependency hits the control plane, and more expectations of a data isolation and other things are now dependent on the control plane, why you need to kind of design that control plane correctly from the start, and why you have to design with multi-tenancy from day one.
Yeah, 100%. I think what happens usually is when we typically see that in the field, right? Like, we see two kinds of founders. One, founders who have experienced running and operating cloud services in the past, and they understand how the world will look like very quickly, and as they have dozens of customers and the challenges that they're going to face. And then we see some founders who haven't had that experience per se, and it's usually the naive thinking is that you start and then kind of build I'll steal the analogy from Michael, like build an airplane while you are in an airplane. And so but that doesn't work, right? The challenge is that it's really when you already started with certain process and certain manual things, and you're already under deep operational burden, then taking on the complexity to reimagine is always harder than if you build the things right. And what often happens is, some of the founders think that this is something that they don't have to worry about it, but they soon realize that, oh my God, the brutal reality is that every customer is in some ways or form are slightly different. They have different requirements. They might be operating in different regions. They might be have different cloud. They have their own cloud accounts. They may have different cloud requirements. They may have different application requirement. They may have different networking settings or infrastructure requirements. So there are variations to all these customers. And not only that, there are requirements being imposed from the technical perspective, but also the requirements from the business perspective. There is a segment of the customers who will be okay with, who are looking for more cost effective, but they are okay with more sharing. But then there's a segment of the customer who are looking for complete isolation. They're ready to throw as much money, and then that really depends upon what industry they are operating in, which vertical they are. And so there are a lot of things that are happening. Uh, and it's important that when you're building a solution, you build a solution in such a way that you can meet your customers where they are, as opposed to other way around. You cannot just live in a world where you say, I am going to define a model and all the world is going to synchronize to my way. No, that doesn't work. The world is operating the way it is operating. The brutal reality is that founders needs to find a way to build a model that works and caters to all the different requirements. And how can you quickly build and adapt is where the control plane comes in. Control plane is not about uh, adhering to one model or two model. That's not control plane. If your control plane cannot evolve, continue to meet. I mean, I think Bill mentioned, like, the world what looks today in 5 years from now will be dramatically different. And that is a true control plane. A true definition of the control plane from a technical perspective is how quickly it can evolve to the isolation requirements, how quickly it can evolve with the compliance and new regulatory requirements. Do we think that all of these regulations and compliance, nothing will change in 5 years with AI? Absolutely not. I mean, we all can pretty much bet money on that, right? And so, wouldn't that impact the way the business processes and how the softwares are delivered? Of course, it will impact that. And so, how is your control plane, ready to take on that? Just that simple as well. Which of like AWS itself is an innovation machine. They're launching in every reinvention, all the instance times are upgraded. So who is going to take care? They're cheaper, better, faster machines. And so are you going to say, no, I'm not going to take that and I'm going to run on 5-year-old machines? Well, you are going to lose a significant amount of money. And your customers are on the loss. So, if you're not going to move, your customer will move themselves to find a better solution. And so you have no choice in the highly evolving industry that we are in. The true definition of control plane is that how quickly you can evolve and keep up with the customer and cater to all those requirements. And that's the true definition, right? And that's the core challenge.
Excellent. So we just have a couple minutes left, and I do want to kind of start wrapping things up. So, Erwin, I did ask earlier, and I think we got a little tied into the architectural answer because it's more fun. But as it relates to data, you're our European expert here. Europe has a lot to say about data in GDPR and data privacy and the rest. I mean, so you guys are definitely leading it, and you guys are leaning in a little harder over there from a Europe perspective. So data as it relates to AI, as it relates to AI agents, what's your view there, and is there a different angle there from the European perspective than it is from those of us over here in the West and in Silicon Valley especially? All data is free, all data is open, let's go grab it all. The Europeans are probably saying something slightly different. And so what's the other angle there?
Yeah. So I think interestingly, both Kamal and Bill said something like, we need to go there where the data is. So Bill was talking about that agent that will actually follow you. And Kamal just also mentioned. So there is recently a concept that in AWS, it's called SaaS Anywhere, right? But it's actually, a possibility to deploy your SaaS application plane or part of the application plane there where the customer data is, right? So, and then there is a kind of, there are 3 different deployment models. I can actually talk about that in some other opportunity, right? But obviously, customers in Europe are actually quite sensitive when it comes to data residency. So they want their their data to stay either within their account or under their control. So very important, and it should be actually within their country or European Union. So this data residency is a quite big topic. And then we are quite, when I say we, I think enterprises in Europe are extremely sensitive when it comes to data privacy. And the first question that you get from a startup in Germany is actually where the data will be located and how I make sure that nobody has access to that data and things like that, because these are the questions that they're getting to customer. I think Americans are more open and you're more kind of solution oriented. So let's kind of deliver a solution and then we will worry about the data. We're talking, from the German perspective, we're more kind of, risk oriented and making sure that everything is agreed upon before we start even building, right, which actually slows us down. So it's not optimal. But I think both, to come back to your question, both for Gen AI and for general SaaS, right, I see that shift where the customer simply says, I have these terabytes of data, it doesn't make sense for me to move it. You need to meet me halfway. So deploy your agents, deploy your SaaS backend logic, do it in my account, right? So we need to find deployment model for that independently of Gen AI.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, especially since we know AI is incredibly good at giving answers, but it's not always good at giving up-to-date or correct answers because it just uses the data it has. And so if the data you're providing is out of date, the AI is going to give you an answer. It's going to be very confident about the answer, and it's going to be 100% wrong. And so making sure that the AI agent is as close to the real data as possible gives you better results and also helps to alleviate some of the concerns around the GDPR and the rest. And so with just a couple of minutes left, I do want to turn it back over to Bill for kind of our closing thoughts on, what you talk to more startups than, everyone on this call talks to a lot of startups and a lot of builders. You might talk to more than the rest of us. What's the thing out there you're hearing? What's everyone's kind of excited about and scared about? And then kind of that'll wrap us up and take us into, we'll do this again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think putting it through a startup lens is interesting because I feel like, and take this all with a grain of salt, I feel startups are less scared about this world because they're already in this world where everything is constantly changing for them. If it's me, I'm much more scared about the enterprises not moving fast enough and not adapting and not really rethinking what they're doing. I was actually just talking to someone today. Enterprises are very much like working on modernization, working on migration, working on these pretty long plays to get to the next step. And we've come into a world where things are jumping ahead at light speed. Startups are very well positioned for that. Now, whether they're all actually doing that, of course, is an open question, right? Are they really adopting best practices? Are they really using this? I think the answer is yes in a lot of cases. A lot of them are seeing the potential. I think a lot of us are still looking at AI through a very much task lens at this point. And that includes the startups I talk to and the enterprises I talk to. Hey, AI is cool. It's doing this piece of code for me. It's doing this, it's making my job of doing sales easier. It's very task oriented right now, but the big leap is it's going to change everything about how we build and deliver software. Like you've heard a lot of like little snippets in this talk today of things that we're talking about, things we're seeing through our own lenses, changing the way we think about compliance, changing the way we think about deployment, changing the way we think about pricing. And if you put all of those and you shake them up in like your magic 8-ball, and it's just the world is changing for SaaS. SaaS is going to evolve whether you're on board or not. So if you're not on board with this yet, I think you're going to be. You may not have found the right on-ramp to deal with AI with your SaaS application. And maybe it isn't the right time for everybody, but I think you need to be exploring this and seeing what it looks like because people are going to find themselves adapting AI, whether they kind of mean to or not. Again, they might continue to use their application. Suddenly AI is going to be part of their application. And this is going to change the way that startups build, in particular, how you deliver. And also, I mean, Ermin, I think you said this very early on, how you're funded. Like VCs are very forward thinking, and they're looking through the lens of, if it's not AI right now, I don't know why I'm putting my money into it. And you might say like, this VC is being dramatic, and oh, maybe not. Honestly, even though it has affected people who are getting funding for SaaS, maybe it's just because they're not thinking enough about how AI fits into their SaaS solution. Talking about just the delivery model right now might not be enough. Talk about the AI solution that you've built. And then SaaS is just the delivery model, like how I'm getting this in front of my customers. The exciting part about what you're doing very likely has an AI aspect to it. If you're positioning this for people who are funding you, why aren't you putting that in front of them? Why are you talking about how you're going to build a SaaS model and like put that that's just implementation details. Let's talk about that exciting stuff. SaaS isn't dead, but maybe it's just moved into the back a little bit in terms of what the story is that we're telling, because we need to emphasize how we're differentiating ourselves, and AI is the way we do that. So anyway, long story long.
I love it. And I do think that does tie into a learning I learned just from Kamal the other day, in terms of in him talking to the VCs. The one thing that I know AI is changing about the VC's view on SaaS and startups and founding is their expectations of efficiency and employee efficiency is changing. And so if as a developer, you're not leveraging the AI tools and you're still kind of putting out the same amount of work, and if your team of 10 is still doing the same amount of work your team of 10 was doing 2 years ago, you've got a problem, because the VCs aren't rewarding that. And so if you're not leveraging the AI tools, should be making you more efficient. The AI tools should be able to help you build things faster. And if your team of 10, if your team of 5 is doing what a team of 10 was doing 5 years ago, great. And by the way, that team of 5 might be needing to be doing what that team of 10 was doing next year. And so the expectations of efficiency, especially as it is applied to the startups, is absolutely changing. And you have to be able to do more with fewer people. And if you're not, you're going to have a problem. And I do think that speaking to the impact to enterprise, I think that tail will be a little slower as it attaches to the enterprises, but I think that's going to happen as well. And so AI should be making employees more efficient. That will not mean that employees have more free time in the day. It will mean that you expect your employees to do more stuff.
And but by the way, Bill, I wanted to say, if you decide to start a company that will deliver that personalized AI agent that will follow you everywhere, I'm going to invest into that.
We got our new business model, everyone. Let's go. Let's just go find a VC who's willing to fund it. Anyone listening? I need about $18 million.
We talked to 2 companies last week who both are in YC, trying to actually build that out now. So it's a great idea. Other people's have it. You better get going, because it's going. And all of them are reaching out to us saying, okay, so I know how to build the LLM to do this. How do I deliver it? How do I secure it? And that's the part that gets hard. So with that, I want to thank you guys. This has been an amazing talk. You guys I learn every time I talk to you. So I appreciate you guys leaning in. This is a community. We are, if anyone's listening into this session, hopefully via our recorded calls, we will post this in our SaaS Money community. This is intended to be a community. We don't claim ownership. We want everyone to rally around and participate. And if anyone wants to join as a panelist and has a topic they want to discuss, we're going to be doing this every 2 weeks. And stay tuned for links to our next couple of sessions. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Bill, Erwin, Kamal. Great time as always.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, team.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Bye.